Bonsai is a hobby for supervillains. That's how I see it portrayed most often in movies and television shows, anyway, as an aesthetic object appreciated by Bond villains, Hannibal, the character Brenner in Stranger Things. I think the logic is that it represents a cold and clinically precise villain, one who likes to imprison things, cut them up, and force them to obey his private desires.
My father made this. He loved his plants so much.
By the way, did anybody watch Severance? And if so, were you as excited as I was to see that Mr. Milchick not only has a pretty nice pine bonsai in his office, he also keeps a tube of bonsai cut paste in a drawer. Of course, it's not a great idea to keep a nice bonsai like that in a basement office, and I do hope the producers are putting it outside between takes. That's a pretty nice tree.
Your Audi knows a beautiful rock from a plain one.
Another way you often see bonsai in movies and TV shows is as a prop in science fiction, particularly dystopian science fiction and especially cyberpunk. Here, they serve the twin purpose of being an ironic piece of nature, preserved amongst dystopian chaos, while also, especially for cyberpunk, offering a flourish of Japanese aesthetics. In real life, I think the personality of the average bonsai hobbyist is quite different. I've thought about this a little. What kind of person is attracted to this hobby? And what does it say about me that I'm attracted to it? Perhaps the most truthful part of the bonsai villain cliché would be that it appeals to people who are seeking some sort of control, although I would say that the control they're seeking is usually over their own lives rather than the world in its entirety. There's a sense of trying to make order out of chaos to find inner peace. Something you do see in the bonsai world is someone who, at first glance, might be a terrifying member of an outlaw motorcycle gang, but who's carefully tending their trees with love and gentle affection. Of course, there are many hobbies that offer some kind of peaceful practice, and many of those also feature engaging with nature. You can go hiking or paint watercolor landscapes. You can even be a standard gardener like my mother, who likes growing orchids, but whose attitude to it is on some fundamental level completely alien to me. I could imagine getting interested in orchids if I was more into flowers than I am, but I know if I did, I would be carefully creating my own potting mixes and doing that thing where you try to cross-pollinate them with a paintbrush. That's a taste of summer right there. So there is that element of, I think, scientific curiosity as well in the average bonsai hobbyist, and probably also some obsessiveness. But the thing that most sets bonsai apart from other kinds of peaceful, creative hobbies must surely be the time thing. There has to be something in you that hears it will take decades for your tree to become beautiful and thinks, yeah, that's what I want in a hobby. Perhaps it's a desire to get away from the frenzy of modern instant gratification dopamine hits. I don't think it's a desire for internal punishment, at least I hope not. Maybe it's a thing in you that thinks, yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about how long it's going to take for me to get where I'm going. There is a conversation that I keep having. It's where one of my friends reveals to me that they think they're somewhere on the autistic spectrum. My reaction is always the same. I say, I never thought that about you. I just thought you're an interesting person that I've always gotten on well with. So it's not something that bothers me. It's just strange that it keeps happening. I am old enough to remember when Rain Man first came out, and there were all these articles then explaining what autism was. At that time, it wasn't really something you heard about a lot. Now, it seems like everyone knows an autistic child or two, but I still tend to think of autism like that. This new thing where a lot of different people are diagnosed or self-diagnosed as being somewhere on a spectrum is still something I'm wrapping my head around. Now, a couple of years ago, there was a really good Korean drama called Extraordinary Attorney Woo about an autistic lawyer. It's a really good show. You should check it out if you like K-dramas. Anyway, there was one scene in it where she has to try on a wedding dress and someone asks her if she likes it and she says, "It feels like it's made entirely of tags."
대단히 불편합니다. 라벨로만 만들어진 옷 같아요.
Because clothing tags are something she can't stand. Her father has to cut them out of her clothes. And that made me go, huh, because when I was a kid, I used to drive my mother crazy by complaining about how much my clothes tags bothered me, and she always had to cut them out. It made me think about other things, like my vague discomfort with eye contact and my sometimes awkward social manner and my ability to accidentally offend people and, yeah, my tendency towards obsessive interests. After I watched that show, I read an interview with an autistic person about their take on it, and that person said it was a good portrayal of autism. But they also talked about masking and said, look, if this autistic person really was this intelligent, they would have learned how to hide all these symptoms. And that made me think about this perception I've had, at least since my teenage years, that the social rules are instinctive to other people were things I could only understand by intensive study and observation. That the things that came naturally to other people were things that I had to learn, and that the result was a kind of carefully constructed but imperfect artifice that tended to fall apart easily, and whose cracks other people eventually came to realize and be annoyed by. And that made me think about these videos and my metaphor of growing. So I wondered, is what I'm talking about really just an autistic way of masking and coping with the world? One of these friends told me about this thing called the double empathy problem. To oversimplify a complicated academic theory, this is the idea that people on the autistic spectrum don't lack empathy. It's just that they have a different kind of empathy. So they can understand other autistic people but struggle with normal people. So maybe there's a reason I keep having that conversation with the few people I know who I understand and who understand me. Anyway, I took an online Are You Autistic test and the results were borderline. I was at a level where autism should be considered as a possible diagnosis, but I don't think it's really something I want to pursue. I've managed to get this far in life, not without difficulty, but for the most part without crippling dysfunction. We're all on spectrums, and it's not news to me that I tend to be somewhere on the outer edges of most of them. It's at this point that the video I was trying to make went off the rails. The next part was supposed to be about an epiphany I had while I was in Australia, an understanding of life and how to exist in the world. But I recorded this narration 5 or 6 times and I kept having issues with it. A lot of it was technical problems, but I also kept not seeing the epiphany I was talking about when I watched myself. In Australia, sitting at night by my pond by myself, I got an understanding of something. Just a really cool vibe to sit here right now. There's a thunderstorm coming. My neighbors over on this side are watching Squid Game 2, so I can hear the sound of Korean. And it's humid and the light is crazy. It felt important in the moment, and for a few days I wandered around in a daze in the certainty of the truthfulness of this insight. But when I came back to Korea, it kept slipping away from me. It wasn't that my understanding was wrong, exactly, just that it was a fragile thing, this thin mental line that I needed to walk along with. Almost anything could throw me off. Not sleeping enough, or a slight headache, or the petty irritations of everyday life, and I've had a lot of those lately. The more I tried to talk about it, the more I felt it drifting away from me, and I began to not believe the things I was trying to say. So I'll just say this. I think I grew over my time in Australia. When I arrived in Australia, I felt ramshackle and perturbed. I felt like I needed to have an epiphany. There were lots of things in my head, my feeling that my time in Korea was approaching an end, and all the complexities that come with concepts like family and home. I did a lot of bonsai and spent time with my family. I worked on a lot of trees and recorded a lot of it too. It And there was also a lot of trees I didn't get to. I didn't do anything with this, I didn't do anything with this, I didn't do anything with that, I didn't do anything with the forest. But I did come to a sort of understanding about things. And then while I was trying to record my understanding and getting frustrated at trying to talk about something I wasn't feeling, I suddenly had a new insight. Understood why I wasn't succeeding in communicating it. And it made me realize that there was no one particular insight, but just a continuous process. The process I've gone through my whole life of trying to wrap my head around things that, to other people, are probably instinctively obvious. I mean, my epiphany was nothing terribly profound. It could be summarized by the title of an 80s self-help book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. Or a book that's out currently, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. My way of understanding it was a lot more complicated than that, but the conclusion was extremely simple. One thing I've learned as I go on in life is that all the important lessons, when I finally absorb them, are cliched cookie-cutter wisdom. Maybe some people hear them once and just accept them and live a happy life, or never need to hear them at all. For me, it takes a tremendous amount of personal struggle and fighting with myself to get there, and even then it's not a standard that I can always maintain. That is my makeup. This is how I understand life. But my approach does sometimes lead to interesting results, even if they're not always optimal. And sometimes other people get something from the creative results that seem to emerge almost as a byproduct of this process. So I think I'll just go on and continue what I'm doing. There hasn't been too much about bonsai in this, and I want to say something to the 100 or 200 people that have made it this far and who stick with my videos and understand that this is not really a bonsai channel, but a channel about me and my journey. As cliched as that sounds, and that bonsai is just a way I have for understanding and expressing things. You're only a small fraction of the people that watch my videos, and I understand that. There is no particular reason for anyone to care about some guy making idiosyncratic videos about doing bonsai and trying to understand the world from a country town in Korea. I also want to say that I think I'm mostly done with making bonsai in Korea from tiny seedlings and trying to keep them alive on my rooftop. I think I've learned all I can learn from doing that. When I went back to Australia, I didn't even ask my landlord to water them. I'll keep up with maintaining the ones I still have, the ones that have survived anyway, but I think there is a good chance that this will be my last year in Korea, and I want to focus on something else. I haven't lost interest in bonsai or making videos, but I need to go on some different kinds of journeys for a while. I can't always respond to the comments. They can be overwhelming, and even choosing to respond to some versus others feels like a slight, so it's better for me to let the videos speak for themselves. But I do read the comments, and most of them are full of genuine kindness, and I really appreciate that. So I hope you'll stick around for what comes next. I do have a lot of things I want to make videos about. Sometimes the videos will be about some bonsai thing that interests me, and other times they'll just be about me growing adjacent to bonsai. Regardless, I remain yours sincerely, Zachary Growing.